Deirdre belongs to the Friends of Colo River, which has about 60 members. In the year 2000, a group of bushwalkers took on a seemingly impossible task to eradicate black willows from the Colo River in the heart of the Wollamai wilderness. The group turned into the Friends of the Colo and still today do remote area bush regeneration in the Colo and other catchments as well. In the last 22 years, black willows have essentially been eradicated from the Colo River system, and now other species are being targeted too. I told Deirdre that quite a few of us are involved in bush regeneration and land care as well, so we'll find this very interesting. So thanks, Deirdre. If you can start your presentation, that'd be great.
So I'm actually the president of Friends of the Colo at the moment. I've taken over from some other people who have been the president for 20 years or something. I'm a bit new to the organisation in regard to that, but I have been in Friends of the Colo for 12 years now. So I know a little bit about it, although I wasn't in the Friends of the Colo when they started. The Friends of the Colo, some have suggested, is the first self-managed volunteer adventure conservation group, and it was formed in the year 2000. And the idea was to undertake remote area weeding in the Wollamai National Park and Wilderness, which the National Parks and Wildlife Service manage. So the Colo River comes through from the Capity River in the west through Glen Davis, and the Wolgan Rivers again from the west up from Nunes, and they join together, and at that point that's where the Colo River starts. It's joined by the Wollamai Creek from the north, and then it starts heading south and is then joined by the Wollongambie, which is this river here. Can you see my pointer coming up from the south and across? This other river here would be Nayuk and Bungalbori creeks that both come into the Wollongambie and then into the Colo River before it heads off onto the plains where Richmond, Windsor are. So that's the sort of area, and you'll notice that there's no roads in this area. Do not come near the river at all. There's no road directly to the river until you're way down here, the very bottom of the river. It's about 100 kilometres in all of gorge country, and the only way to get to the Colo River is by some bush tracks and walking or maybe helicoptering into it. So the access is very, very limited. Being to the Colo, this is what the gorge looks like from one of its vantage points. Yes. As you can see, it's quite dramatic country. It's very, very rugged, has very limited numbers of ways in which you can get down to the river. So there's very specific passes that you have to use. And you can see it's about 300-metre drop down from the top of the mountains down to the river bottom itself. So it has lovely tall sandstone cliffs, and they are just absolutely beautiful at sunrise and sunset when the sun is shining either from the east or the west. When you're down on the river itself is a sandy bottom river because of all the sandstone that passes through, and you have these towering cliffs above you when you're walking or rafting along the river. So how did Friends of the Colo start? In 1998, a friend of mine, Graham Ravenswood, who's a bushwalker, but he was also a bush regenerator, went on a bushwalking, lilo-ing trip down the Colo River. And he was horrified to find an extensive gallery of invasive black willows. He'd come in from a place called Canoe Creek and was going downstream and found these black willows were just lining the river in this pass. He decided to map the locations of all these willows, and then when he got home, he wrote to the National Parks and Wildlife Service and asked what they were going to do about the fact that these willows, who were exotic plants, had invaded such a wilderness area. The staff don't usually get to places like this because it's so difficult to get there. So, but there was a ranger at the time who received this question. His name was Ian Turner, and he decided in 1999 to organise a canoe trip down to investigate these claims. They had in this group a party of 4 staff members, 2 volunteers, and they organised to have a helicopter fly in these Canadian canoes into the junction of the Wamai Creek and Colo River, and they thought they'd paddle down the river in these Canadian canoes. And that's the group that went. There was a couple of bushwalkers. Some of you may have heard of this fellow here. His name is Jeff Cottrell, and he's still part of Friends of Colo today. None of them had a lot of experience of canoeing the river or had much experience of all the challenges, because there are a lot of what do you call them? Rocks, and canoes would have been quite a challenge to get past any of the rock rapids. But ultimately, the expedition confirmed there was a lot of these black willows, which is named Silixa nigra, along the river. Now, this black willows have been declared a weed of national significance. Yeah, they changed the river habitat and push out all the native river forms. So they realised that they needed to do something about this problem. Now, these willows, I thought I'd go on to showing you what they look like. They look a little bit like an acacia, I suppose, but they have serrated leaves. And you can see in this picture how they are growing into the river and they start to clog up the river a great deal. A close-up, I hope you can see this one. I might make it a bit bigger. That's the plant in flower. So the black willows can grow up to 20 metres high. And they're found along a lot of New South Wales and Victorian rivers. They came from North America and Eurasia, and they were planted originally for to control erosion on rivers. So you do find them, but we've now found them to be a very, very aggressive weed. Anyway, with regard to Friends of Colo, the next year a new ranger came along named Vanessa Richardson, and she decided that to deal with these willows, she decided to have a 5-day helicopter-supported canoe trip for staff and volunteers, and they had 28 people involved in this trip. Half of them were staff and half were volunteers. They selected people with different skills, some who were good bushwalkers, some who were good paddlers, and some who cover all the different aspects of the challenges that they had. And the event was called Willows Out of Wamai. And it took place in April in 2000. They divided the group into 3 groups, and they started at different points along the gorge, and they were helicoptered in with all their canoes and equipment and supplies. And but they found the Canadian canoes were really not suitable for the river because they had so much trouble having to portage things and getting around various aspects about what the bush regeneration work was involved, and actually successfully treated a lot of the willows as they went. So there's a photo of helicoptering in supplies on one of the sandbanks, and you can see how the canoes were there with, these are the willows on the edge of the sandbank, and they were trying to treat these sorts of willows. They took along just a small number of tools. They chiseled the trunks of the trees and poisoned them with some poison that they had. That way they could kill off all these plants. One thing that happened during this trip, though, having a wide range of different skilled people, they actually found that although they didn't succeed as far as they wanted to, they did develop a very special bond between all these people. And they decided that although the challenge of trying to treat so many willows and so many trees in a large area seemed a very challenging decision, they really felt that they all encouraged one another a lot, and they were able to decide to make a group of it. Here you can see some of them doing some of the work of poisoning these trees, and you can see how large they had become. They were really quite a significant change to the river system. People were first joined in by word of mouth. Here's some of the challenges going down some of the rapids in their canoes. And I'm sure that would have been quite an exciting trip if you were in that canoe at the time. There is a rapid at the bottom, towards the bottom of the Colo River called King's Rapid. And it's one that very few people can actually go through because it's such a big rapid and it's very dangerous. This is not King Rapid though. Sometimes they had to line the canoe through the rapids so that they could get the equipment down. Trying to carry these canoes was quite difficult. So they had the first meeting of Friends of the Colo in June 2000. And this is Vanessa Richardson leading that meeting and the various people who decided to start dealing with these issues. They met with Bushwalking Club and the National Parks Association, and they also had word of mouth, and they did a few things like write newsletters, etc., for people to hear about it. So the group decided to start planning activities to survey and treat willows, but they needed a bit of money because it was quite an expensive exercise to bring in canoes by helicopter. So they decided to get a grant for more equipment. Here's a photo of a group of people who were in one of the second trips. And they went down the river on lilos rather than the canoes, which are much easier to handle. You can just get up and walk around obstacles instead of trying to line your canoe through or something. And that was another way of doing trips down the river. Here's another person who, again, they decided to get two-man rafts. So with the first grant, they bought some of these two-man rafts and went down the river in that. And again, they were much easier to handle and were much easier to manipulate through some of the rapids. They also decided to take part in exercises of training of how to paddle. And these exercises were often conducted at the Penrith Whitewater Centre. They were able to learn how to cross rivers together safely, even though there might be very strong currents, how to recover a person and throw ropes and other such things. And this was all done to improve all the obstacles and problems that they were having with people who didn't know a lot about paddling in rivers. So all these programs were developed, and they got a lot of help from the Penrith Whitewater Stadium. So the first grant, they were able to buy 3 two-man canoes and rafts. No, they were rafts. No, they weren't pack rafts. And this is one of the groups that went on that second trip, and they started doing various trips down sections of the Colo River. They also did a trip down the Walgan and Capity rivers, and just did a survey to see how things had happened, how things were going there, because they didn't know how far the Black Willows had travelled. They initially thought the Black Willows, after this survey, that the Black Willows had actually been coming upstream from the Richmond area rather than downstream, because there were no Black Willows further upstream. In this photo, you can see how they're treating one of the willows. So they chisel the tree, and then someone puts in poison in the chisel holes. And here's some of the rafts, all fully laden, trying to get them past rocks, etc. And that again became very difficult. Lower parts of the Colo, you can see the rocks in the distance that they will have to challenge to get past those. So they did this regularly after about 3 or 4 years. I think they did 4 trips or 5 trips. And they found their kill rate of poisoning these Black Willows was around 98%. So they actually achieved a very high level of kill rate. And they had to keep going back for any new seedlings, etc. But as they went back over and over, there was fewer and fewer of those things. So the Colo River, where the pink is, the solid pink line is where they were treating these Black Willows. You can see they've extended right back up onto the Walgan River, the Capity River, all the way down the Colo. There was a few found in Wallamai Creek as well. And they were treating them, but they wiped out many of them. Then they found that they were to continue treating them, they had to actually start killing off weeds in on land that's privately owned, not just in national park. And that made Friends of the Colo look at a different aspect, because they had to start working with Hawkesbury City Council and other government agencies to discuss further downstream. People are still working on some of those now, because it's sometimes hard to get private landowners to kill off the willows on their land. So there's still some willows, especially on private lands further downstream. So after about 5 years, they successfully treated all the willows in about 80 kilometres of the Colo River. Further up on the top end of the Walgan, there's other willows. There were crack willows up there. That's just a different species, another hybrid. So they've been treating those up on the top end of the Nunes, near Nunes. And there were some other willows we've treated as well in the Capity National Park. So that's what those ones were there. Again, that's still part of the Capity River. So after all that happened, Friends of Colo had to decide whether to continue working on willows, since they'd achieved their primary goal of clearing the Black Willows from the Colo River, and whether they were to move on to other rivers and other river systems, or whether they should move on to other weeds in the same Colo area. Choice was made. And so we've continued to work on the Colo River and looked at other weeds that have affected the river. So we really only work in the riparian zone. So we're not worrying about the top of the hills. It's just that sort of 30 metres either side or 20 metres either side of the river down on the river itself. Since then, we now start looking at other weeds, one being, that's the two-man canoes there, again, in a beautiful spot. And there's the helicopter that they used to use to get the canoes and the rafts into the river. So now we're up to the next, where we're starting to target other weeds along the Kapiti River, the Walgan, Wallamai Creek, Wallangambi, and the Colo. So one of the problems was a weed called Cape Ivy, and this is Cape Ivy in a place called near the Girrabung Creek, which is really right in the heart of the Colo. I might just go back and show you where Girrabung is. Girrabung comes in here, right here, and it's about the most central part of the national park. It's a 2-day walk minimum to get there. And it really is not the easiest place to get to. We've had to get there many times. So it's, and we had a situation where Cape Ivy was climbing the trees, as you can see, covering everything that was there, and everything underneath it just dies off. The natural environment dies off. Yes, this is what it looks like a bit closer up. It's like the English ivy, but it has a few more points. I'm not a biologist or a botanist or anything, so probably will say the wrong terms with regard to identifying things, but it's quite a distinctive light green colour, and the shape it got into the Walgan River by some early pioneers. A woman who lived down on the Walgan River further downstream from Nunes liked it, brought it in, planted it in her garden, and ever since it started growing downstream. It's been taken downstream by the river and taken off in various places. And it's had a major effect, especially in flood areas that get flooded easily. Another one is Tree of Heaven. Here's Tree of Heaven now. It forms a large group of plants. It grows mainly by suckers, although it can grow by seed. And it has that distinctive peanut butter smell when you're near it. So if you scrape it or bend the leaves, you'll smell, it smells like peanut butter, but it has a gland on the leaf that's quite distinctive, being Tree of Heaven. We've got to be careful that we don't mix it up with some cedars that are growing in there, because they look very similar to the cedars that are natural. Volunteers identifying this and treating the Tree of Heaven. Again, we do a lot of scrape and paint. So with Tree of Heaven, we've got to get a lot of poison into them. So we scrape the stems, and that's the best way to get rid of them from our point of view. So other weeds that we might look at is, this is a crack willow, I think. We were treating that. Lantana is another problem we've got, and it's blowing up from the lower parts of the Colo. So we're treating that below Bob Turner's track down towards Colo Maru. So that patch there is just a constant battle for us at the moment, treating this lantana. Another tree that we have a lot of problem with is what we call Gladicia. It has these large spikes. Can you see the spikes on this picture? I'll make it a bit bigger. Very nasty spikes. They can be a couple of inches in length at times. Beautiful, lovely big tree, but nasty spikes. And it looks like this with a beautiful light green growth that comes out in spring. And this tree is found mainly on the Kapiti River, down to the Colo. It's been grown upstream of Glen Davis on the farms. I believe they like to plant it as a way of fencing things off. People don't tend to want to go near these trees because they're such a nasty tree. Another one that we are targeting a lot is moth vine. This has a white sap. Again, it grows up the trees and kills off, like all vines, gradually smothers the native plants. And the seed pods have thousands upon thousands of seeds that get windblown. And I believe they can be blown up to 30 kilometres away. So they can really travel a long way. So when we have moth vine, we have to try and treat that. Again, we find the root and scrape as much as we can, although the white sap often helps to slow down the poison getting in. And we try and collect as many of the seed pods as possible and we burn them when we're in the bush because we can't really carry them all out. This is the next one, tobacco bush. This is mainly down on the lower parts of the Colo River, another tree or bush we're trying to reduce. And another one we do is figs. So where people have been, they often leave figs and the figs are just loving the river. So we've had a lot of fun and games trying to kill off figs because, again, they have a very great ability to regenerate. And the final one I'm going to show you is privet, the putty area with narrowleaf privet as well. We've had a lot of fun and games whenever we walk down the river. We have to endure quicksand sometimes, as you can see. It looks like it's solid, but it's not always. And sometimes you just get caught. So it's always a bit of a laugh when somebody gets caught by quicksand. Sometimes we have to climb out and a few ropes and a bit of struggle, and you manage to get up the rock climbs that may be needed if we're coming out in an unusual spot. There's always the rafting, which is a lot of fun and very relaxing when you can just paddle down the river easily. And there's always just the camaraderie of the group of whatever happens, let's walk. So we have a lot of fun while we're doing all this bush regenerating. The Colo is just a beautiful river to walk down, and with its sandy bottom, it's a delightful trip. It takes us usually about 7 days to walk down from either Nunes or Glen Davis, and we come out often at Hollow Rock Hill on the Colo Range. So it's a beautiful trip if anyone wants to do it and is prepared to carry their pack all the way. Once again, when you get to the top, you always enjoy the view looking back down into the gorge. This is a view looking down from the T3 track or from the Tootie Creek, the track that goes into Tootie Creek. As you can see, it really is a stunning gorge. Enjoying the river on a raft is just a lovely exercise to do. And that's my talk for you. I hope you learnt something.
If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and view other great content? New videos being added all the time.